So now that we're about 50 hours into Primus, my second AI game, here's where we're at. So this week's been a little bit slower than I imagined as I've been getting a bit distracted, but we've still been able to make some pretty good progress. This week I was able to finish up all the gladiator abilities and passives, so that's one of the things. So from games like Raid Shadow Legends, what I quite like is when each champion has their own unique abilities, but also their own unique passive ability, which basically runs throughout the turn-based combat. And I basically implementing this as well. Now, I'm taking a bit of a step away from, I guess, the Raid Shadow Legends thing when it comes to the amount of gladiators. So far, there are 11 gladiator classes. Don't ask me why, there's just 11. Now, all of these are based off like actual real life types of gladiators that were sort of in the Roman era. So that's really, really cool. And I figured that one of the things that eventually I will be looking at doing is making animations for the characters, ideally idle animations. I talked about this last time, so I'm not going to get too much into it. I am yet to actually do these, but when I get around to it, I figured, well, I'd rather I had less to work with than to work with like hundreds of gladiators. So that's pretty much what we're doing so far. But yeah, I pretty much made all the abilities. The idea is this is somewhat similar to what Darkest Dungeon does. With Darkest Dungeon, I believe when you're given new, I guess, heroes, if you will, they have, I think, like, it might be like a total of like 8 abilities. They get picked a random 4, and then the remaining 4 are unlocked, and then you can choose to unlock them and level them up however you want. So I'm doing something similar with Primus with the gladiators, but I'm also doing something where each gladiator will have 3 locked passives, where you can select one passive out of the 3 to use, and those will help you throughout the game. So, for example, one of the passives could be something where, you know, whenever a debuff is placed on the gladiator, perhaps they counterattack. Or perhaps, you know, they have, you know, like their attacks, if they hit a critical, it increases their energy meter. That sort of thing. So that's sort of one of the things which I've been working on. At the moment, I've just pretty much made some stuff there. I'm probably going to go back and change them. But that's pretty much that. The next thing I've then been working on has been the Gladiator HUD. And basically the locations. So one of the things that I did with Scarred Steel, my first game, is when it came to entering location, I had almost like a little circle, and when you hover over it, it would get a little bit bigger, and you click it, and then you'd enter the location. What I thought I'd try and do is, you know how in games when you highlight, for example, certain buildings, and almost the outline of that building basically highlights or something, I thought I'd try and do that. And I was actually able to do that. What I basically did is I took my main landscape image and I duplicated it, and I basically went to the editing tool and I basically hid and masked everything but that building or whatever it was. And once I'd done that, I then basically saved that, put that into my project. And what I was basically able to do is that when you hovered over an area, or hovered over a certain sort of area button, that image would basically fade in and it would have like an outline. And I'll probably show a video here just to give you a bit of an idea, but it looks pretty good, right? It took a bit of time, just sort of being quite careful with it, but I think it looks pretty good, or at least it looks better than the sort of thing that I had back in Scarred Steel. So that's really encouraging. Other thing they looked at was basically having the gladiator roster. So what I've got is that on the left hand side, not only do you have your faction at the top, which I think all the faction icons look pretty cool, but you've also got basically all your gladiators that will be in the list. The idea is that if you right click on them, it opens up the gladiator panel, and you can see more information about your gladiators and such in terms of abilities, which you can unlock and such. So there's been quite a few things going on. At the moment, I'm still working on the item and the equipment system. At the moment, in terms of the equipment system for Primus, it is A little bit mixed. So I'm using the concept that Raid Shadow Legends has in terms of you've got 6 equipment slots, and each of them have a primary stat. And obviously they can get little substats as you upgrade them. What I also am sort of using from Raid Shadow Legends is, or looking to implement, is the equipment synergies. So something I quite like is when you can have, for example, if you have 2 of a kind, 3 of a kind, or 4 of a kind of a certain type of equipment, you get, that gladiator, or in Raid Shadow Legends case, that champion gets a certain buff. So if you had maybe 2 of the life set equipped to a gladiator, they could get increased health by, like max health by 10-15%, for example. That sort of stuff. So yeah, I'm pretty much in the middle of implementing that to Primus. I think it'll be quite good. I'm the biggest challenge I'd say that I'm trying to have is I don't want Primus to be, I guess, too grindy, in terms of what Raid Shadow Legends is like. But I also don't want Primus to also be too punishing, or too completely unforgiving, like Darkest Dungeon is. So working on that, one of the biggest things I think with Darkest Dungeon, or at least one of the biggest complaints, is when players will spend, tons and tons of hours, and then they'll lose one of their heroes, or whatever you call them, which, might have been really high level, and then they feel like they've lost like 20 plus hours, which I think is fair enough. And I think one of the things that I'm probably going to look at doing for Primus is basically having where if a gladiator dies in combat, they come back shattered and they enter a shattered state. Where, for example, they might get like certain debuffs. They might take a long time to recover, but then the debuffs that they have is permanent. Now, one of the things I will say, which I'm looking to do, which I'm actually really looking forward to the game, is the hype system. So with Primus, what I really want to do is I want to be able to make the combat and the arenas actually feel like Roman arenas, with the idea of the hype system, where what will happen at the moment in my head is that you and the enemy will have almost like a hype meter. It will both start at the same, and what will happen is that as you, for example, land critical hits, kill enemies, or perhaps perform like showboat stuff to the crowd, the hype meter will change. And depending on whether your hype meter is low and theirs is high, or the other way round, will depend on what happens. So if you've got low hype and the enemy has higher hype, then the crowd might start throwing stones at you, dealing damage to your gladiators, perhaps giving you debuffs. And what could also happen is that if the enemy got, high amounts of hype, then they could receive certain buffs like increased defense, or they could even get healed. What the plan is that because you start at rank 100 and your aim is to get to rank 1, the idea is that as you go up in rank, the popularity and the quality of the arena will go up, meaning that the hype will have more significant impact. For example, it could be the case that if the enemy has really high hype, they could release a lion or a tiger or whatever into the arena to join the enemy's team. Right? So stuff like that. And one of the things when I was brainstorming with AI, I was talking about the idea that perhaps, there could be like the Emperor's Thumb, where, how in gladiator stuff they'll do the Emperor's Thumb, where the spare or the sort of execute. You could have something where, if you're in a very high end arena, there's a chance for the Emperor's Thumb to occur, where all gladiators that have like less than 25% HP get executed, like that sort of thing. But anyway, lots of interesting stuff there, because the thing is with games like Darkest Dungeon, and I guess even Raid Shadow Legends, the idea really is you want to pretty much kill the enemy as quick as possible. The only thing you're thinking of. With Primus, I want the idea to be killing the enemy, but also appeasing the crowd. If you don't appease the crowd, then you're going to run into some issues. So that's the sort of balance that I want to have, but that's still somewhat vague at the moment. But pretty happy with what we have so far with that. Moving forward, in terms of what we're going to be working on for next week, It's pretty much going to be getting or at least solidifying the whole armor and loot stuff. What I do need to solidify is the dungeon crawler aspect. If I'm honest, I don't want to be modifying or taking really that much at all from Darkest Dungeon. I want to try and figure out how I want to do my own dungeon crawler, but that's still very, very vague at the moment. And one of the plans, I think, is hopefully by the end of next week, I will look to release the coming soon page. It's not a massive rush, but I would like to get it out either by the end of next week or the week after, just because I want to be able to get it in front of people. I want to obviously build up wish lists somewhat early, so that's what we'll do. And then yeah, we'll probably have a demo out within the next within the next month or month and a half. Not sure yet, but we're still working on that. But yeah, we're doing all right, I think, in terms of progress and just keeping at it. And again, if you have any questions about what I'm doing, then you can obviously feel free to ask. And I cover a few more in-depth things about AI game development in my Discord if you're interested. But thanks for coming along, and I'll keep you updated for the next one.